Sanders for the middle class.
Wealthiest people are becoming phenomenally rich, while we have over 40 million people living in poverty. The very least that we can say is that nobody in America goes.
The Pied Piper Bernie Sanders for the middle class. What a GOP wants to put our interests last. He's gonna give it to you raw, no hesitation. With the right ideas to lead this great nation. No handouts, no special interest groups. He don't lie to give votes, he's telling you the truth. And while the media wants to downplay him, he's still gonna fight. Tell him all he ain't playing. Push him for higher wages so we all can feed our families. The only one I know who can conquer this insanity of this Wall Street bickering, belittling the poor. Dollar bills, only thing they considering. When people need health care, kids need school. When it comes to politics, Bernie's breaking rules. No attack gets on the competition's needed. He's running on the facts and it's something that we needed. Feel the burn, make him feel the burn. All the way to the White House, feel the burn. Feel the burn, make him feel the burn. Till the haters on the right, they can feel the burn. Feel the burn.
Oh yeah. Everybody feeling the burn right now? It is time for a Bernie Sanders rally. Hey everybody. It's 30 seconds away, 10 seconds away actually. We're waiting for our revolution to go live. I'm waiting for them to kick this in. And as soon as I do, we'll start watching Bernie Sanders. Town hall on free college for all. Get the feeling he's setting up his plan for running in 2020. I sure do. Here we go. We're live at Castleton. Looks like it's still a little early too. Let's see if I can get that framed out. Hey everybody. How are you? Barbara and Manic and Real. Sam. Who else is here? Lynn. I'm working with a weird screen today for weird reasons. It's got a half screen on me right here. Anyway, give me a second. Let me frame this out. Did you see the cover card I put up here? That is happening tomorrow. You should join us. Sarah Smith, candidate for Washington District 9. She's going to join us. He's a brand new Congress endorsed candidate. We just had Amy Villela on last night. Anyway, let me get this framed up here. And they're playing tunes. Hang on a second. There we go. That's your view right there. Waiting for Bernie to show up. How is everybody? Hey JJ, how you doing? Sitter Vane. I'm the Mr. Rogers of the Revolution. I can have it. That's fine. That works for me. I can be that. You know, Mr. Rogers, when he wasn't on camera being Mr. Rogers, he was a normal human being. He said, he used the F word. So, that works for me. I like that. I do have the sweater. I don't think I have the poise or the professionalism of Mr. Rogers. He was quite the... I don't know if you really think about what he had to do in his show live. That's pretty impressive. And knowing what it takes to do just this, what he was doing, a children's show back then that I watched, that's impressive shit. He was a performer, you know, he was an educator. It's amazing. He was a good man. So was Scott Galindez. While I have everybody's attention and we're waiting for this to start, just want to remind everybody, I'm putting up some videos about Scott Galindez and the fact that he's no longer with us. I realize this is a talk about free college for all, but it all comes back to the same issues, and that is our government actually doing things for us as opposed to for their own pocketbooks and profit. It's our government is focused on profit instead of on people, and that's really the paradigm that we have to change. And Scott Galindez would be alive today if he were living in many other nations that practice single-payer or better health care than we have. But Scott is basically not with us today because we have a government that values profit over people, which is the antithesis of what a government for the people, by the people, of the people should be. It's not for the profit, of the profit, by the profit. Right? So, anyway. I'm posting up some videos. There was a lot of good footage that was taken. Thank you, Froze, for being there at the event. And a lot of videos I'm posting to the site with people talking about Scott and remembering him and what he did. He was a badass. He was an activist, and he put his life literally on the line for us. And so thank you for all you did, Scott. And we will continue to do what we do in your name. If you guys want to help out, though, Reader-Supported News. Reader-Supported News was the Mark Ash, who's the CEO of Reader-Supported News. They funded the entire funeral and event. Scott was an employee of Reader-Supported News. They're like us, you know. They're an organization that functions off of donations, and if they don't have the money, they can't act. All right, here we go, everybody. Main event. Thank you for joining us today. College for All.
Wow, that was great. Thank you, by the way. Appreciated that. Feel very good about myself. You guys have been very friendly already tonight. It's a wonderful night. My name is Dennis Peru. I'm Dean of Students here at Castleton. And I'm your opening act, so I'm going to try to welcome you and get you ready for this incredible event. On behalf of our president, Dave Walk, who you will hear from later, let me say welcome to Castleton University. In the unlikely event that we need to exit quickly, I want to just point out our exits as you came in, but there are also exits on all four corners of the room. Tonight we're going to hear from students, college graduates with families, and of course Senator Sanders about college affordability. Today's town meeting will be live streamed across the nation, so we're in good company, in good stead. I look out at this audience and see a diverse group of citizens. Citizens spending time together to think on an important topic that has national implications. Castleton is a public university with a public mission. If you don't know, 70% of our students grew up here in Vermont. The other 30% come from throughout the United States and around the world. On any given day, we will have hundreds of students out in the Rutland area as they work in local businesses, they complete internships, they perform clinical rotations at medical facilities, they act as social work interns, student teachers, or volunteer as coaches for youth sports. They are working on their degree while developing their civic and professional identities. We are a public university with a public mission. Hosting tonight's discussion matches our value to contribute to the larger community. It is wonderful to see an audience coming together to hear and share ideas on the importance of higher ed. Of course, we're a bit biased on the topic since Castleton has been doing higher education since 1787. Almost as long as Senator Sanders has been in public service. And on that note, let me say, let's start tonight's program. Help me welcome, on behalf of Castleton University, your junior senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders.
Thank you very much
for being here. This is a great turnout. Dean Prue, thank you very much for your introduction. You guys are in the process of making American history. How's that? What you are going to do in the coming months and years, along with students all over this country and your parents and ordinary Americans, is you're going to transform America in a very, very profound way. And the way you're going to do it is by creating a higher education financial system which says simply and clearly that any person in this country who has the ability and who has the desire should be able to get a college education regardless of the income of his or her family. This is an idea that is not a radical idea, and I'll talk more about it later. It's an idea that already exists in countries around the world, and this will shock you. It is an idea that used to exist in the United States of America. We used to have great public colleges and universities 50, 60 years ago that were tuition-free. So our job together, and by the way, tonight at about 7:30 when I speak, we should have people from some 700 college campuses tuning in. We will have about 15 rallies just like this, and we're going to mobilize people all over this country to demand that our government gets its priorities right, and one of those priorities is to radically change how we finance higher education in America. Now, the truth is that this issue impacts tens and tens of millions of Americans. We have over 40 million Americans today struggling with high student debt. On any given year, hundreds of thousands of young people who want to go to college are unable to do so because their families lack the income. So this is an issue that impacts people all over the state of Vermont, people all over America. And tonight, we're very lucky to have 4 people who are going to talk a little bit about this issue from a very, very personal perspective, what it has meant to them and to their families. Monica Keith is a teacher at Neshobe Elementary School who paid for her 2 oldest children's schooling through traditional parent loans. For her youngest daughter, they are relying on the equity of their home to finance her college degree at Middlebury College. Please welcome Monica Keith.
Hi. Is this on?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Close to your mouth.
In the early 1990s, my husband and I were single parents, each with a young teenage boy. We both worked hard to make ends meet, as neither of us received financial support from our previous spouses. We married in 1995, blending our families, households, and finances. Shortly thereafter, we purchased the convenience store that we continue to own today. We had a decent income with no savings and 2 bright, energetic boys headed to college in a short time. That first year in business, we worked long hours to bring our inventory from a depleted $5,000 to an acceptable amount of about $35,000. Somehow, on college financial aid applications, that $30,000 increase in inventory translated as our family having a stockpile of cash for college expenses. As son number 1 prepared for college, we were offered no financial aid grants and presented with a bill for about $21,000. I wrote an impassioned letter to his chosen school explaining our situation in detail and begging for more help. It left me feeling humiliated and inadequate. I think they felt embarrassed for me because they offered $1,000 to reduce our debt. We were grateful and now only needed to come up with $20,000. We covered this with maximum federal and state student and parent loans. We covered the balance with private bank loans. This acquisition of loans would continue for his 4 years of college, 3 of which were done at a cheaper institution, not his original choice. Our business provided a good living for our growing family. We added a daughter while son number 1 was in college and son number 2 was preparing to head off to college. By the time our daughter was 5 years old, we had celebrated 2 college graduations and amassed a combined debt of close to $100,000, a bargain compared to some of the stories I've heard. I've never been able to focus on the exact amount because it creates too many negative feelings for me. We just set up an automatic payment and dealt with it like a regular living expense. It took 15 years for us to clear this debt. That was 15 years of not being able to put money away for our daughter's education, although we did try. Over the years, we collected about $26,000 in mutual funds that disappeared in the banking stock market upheaval of 2008. Fast forward to present day, and our daughter has just finished her first year of college. We are financing this newest college venture through the generosity of her chosen university, a few academic scholarships, and the equity in our home. If all goes well, we expect to end this 4-year period just under $100,000 in debt once again. My husband will be 65 years old this summer, and he works 60 to 70 hours a week, keeping our business going. I'm an elementary school teacher with a master's degree and 10 years of teaching experience. We are fortunate to have good jobs that we enjoy because retirement may never be an option. We have been purchasing education for our children the way some of our peers purchase luxury items like vacations, boats, and second homes. In our developed society, education should not be a luxury item. Education has to be viewed as a necessity like water, food, clean air, and shelter. I hope this cycle of debt can end before my grandchildren head off to college. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Monica. And understand that for everyone up here, they're not just speaking about themselves. They are speaking about millions of other Americans in exactly the same position. Our next panelist is Grace Adamson. Grace is currently in her 4th year of medical school. She returned to school after a decade of working as an attorney. Has her law school and medical school debt now totals close to $390,000. Grace?
Thanks. Thank you. Kat asked that the rest of the speakers speak up here. I think it's a recording thing. Thank you, Senator Sanders. Yes, again, my name is Grace Adamson. I went to undergraduate school here in Vermont. I did go to law school in Washington, D.C., practiced for a little over a decade in D.C. at a small firm representing community health providers, individuals, and members of the military. And then, yes, I did decide to pursue a medical degree in order to become a primary care physician here in Vermont. And that last endeavor meant going to night school while I worked during the day for almost 5 years just to obtain the undergraduate prerequisites necessary for medical school. So I'm a 4th-year medical student. I'm a resident of Winooski, Vermont, mother to a wonderful 4-year-old son, and wife of a blue-collar union electrical worker here in Vermont. And yes, I did make the decision to pursue all of these careers, but it has not come without significant financial costs. Like the Senator said, I'm 41, and I have almost $400,000 in debt. That is before interest, by the way. And the amount after interest is frankly just unthinkable to me right now. A good portion of that debt was accrued before my medical career journey, and the mounting interest on that right now is daunting. Indeed, the entire sum is overwhelming to me at times. It's a source of great anxiety to me and my family. I have less money in the bank now at 41 than I had when I was 21. I ended up cashing out my retirement account from my law practice in order to fund just the undergraduate portion of my pre-medical education and the related costs that I needed just to apply to medical school. And I'll just say, I know I'm very privileged to even have had a retirement account. I recognize that. Nevertheless, it's gone, and I have no savings for old age and virtually nothing for my son's future college tuition. And my point also in sharing that is that I chose the taxes and the penalties of cashing out my only retirement fund over getting an undergraduate student loan for pre-medical education because I knew the cost would be even greater with another student loan, and I knew I was already facing around the $400,000 in student loans that I have. So. You know, it's more and more rare to be able to find a job in this country today that can support a family that at a minimum doesn't require an undergraduate degree. And as many of you know, from their professions require higher degrees and advanced levels of pre-entry professional training that are very costly. And if we're burdening young adults with large student debts right out of the gate at the first level of undergraduate education, with the prospect of even more debt, with mounting accrued interest on the undergraduate loans, we are setting up significant barriers for those young adults to pursue higher education and fulfill needed jobs in the American workforce. And I'll just make a final point, you know, about taking, for example, my future profession. You know, I personally plan to become a Vermont primary care physician, but we are in desperate need of primary care providers in this country. There is a critical shortage. I'm sure many of you in this audience or your families have waited weeks, even months, just to establish care with a primary care provider. But with a medical education price tag of often over $300,000 before interest, primary care being one of the lower paying specialties too, it's in part no wonder why more people don't choose that specialty. And then if you're tacking on to the medical education bill $30,000 to maybe $100,000 of undergraduate student loan debt, that's even more of a significant deterrent and barriers to most individuals who might be interested in pursuing primary care and filling the shortage of needed community physicians. So Senator Sanders' College for All legislation, by allowing undergraduates to attend college tuition-free, would eliminate these types of barriers for individuals who want to pursue an education and fulfill needed jobs in our country. It also would ensure that undergraduate and non-undergraduate loan interest rates are capped and would allow existing borrowers like myself to refinance at lower rates. That sort of idea would relieve so much anxiety personally for me right now. So I really want to thank Senator Sanders for your proposal to make education more affordable for all Americans. Thank you to the other panelists. Thanks for your story, Monica. And thank you all for letting me share my story in support of this legislation.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Grace. And she touched on a theme that I'm going to touch on in a few minutes in my remarks, and that is there are many millions of people in this country who, because of high levels of student debt, are unable to fulfill their dreams and go out and get the jobs they want rather than gravitate to jobs that pay a lot of money so they can pay off their student debt. So, Grace, thank you, and thank you for becoming a primary care physician. You are absolutely right. We desperately need primary care physicians. Our next panelist is Rachel Casey. Rachel went to a private college for her first year of school. In 1 year, she accumulated roughly $30,000 in debt. Because the loans were unsustainable, she transferred to Castleton. $30,000, 1 year of debt. Rachel?
Good evening. My name is Rachel Casey. I'm a sophomore here at Castleton University, majoring in forensic psychology. While I am a sophomore here, this is my first year at Castleton. Before I get into how I came to Castleton, I'm going to give you a little background knowledge of myself. I come from a low-income family and I'm a first-generation college student. I was an honor student in high school and even participated in the federally funded program TRIO Upward Bound. This is where I really started to learn what college was all about and what it entailed. Growing up, my parents always told me I had two options. One, go to college and get a degree, or 2, some form of service. While I don't like anybody telling me what to do or yelling at me, I chose college. Along with that choice came the debt and loans I would have to pay back myself. Little did I know how much that debt could add up to, and quickly at that. My dream college was a private institute in a suburban area with a really good law program. Needless to say, only one of those dreams came true. I applied to the University of New Haven in West Haven, Connecticut, and was accepted. I was ecstatic and could not wait to attend. I fell in love with their criminal justice program and the campus itself when I went for a visit. I fell so in love with this school, I didn't pay attention to how much debt it would cost me in the end. $54,790 was the cost for this private institute for 1 year before any scholarships. With financial aid from the school and outside scholarships I had won, I was paying around $18,000 for the year. For a first-time college student, I thought this was great. I was paying less than half of the tuition for a year. That was till it was time to apply to the loans. I have a private loan balance of $19,000, but will end up paying a little over $40,000 for 1 year of schooling. That was the deal breaker for me. I would be paying over $160,000 for 4 years of schooling, which didn't even get me to my master's. Now, there was multiple reasons I had decided to transfer to a small college much closer to home. 1, I did not like living in the city. Coming from a small town, the city was scary. It was a huge change and one that just did not match me. I also started to count down the days till I got to come home again, rather than counting down the days I went back to campus with my friends. Another reason, one that probably made the biggest impact, were the loans I'd be paying back in 4.5 short years later. I was paying $40,000 a year for what? A degree that I could get for a much cheaper price? Part of the tuition I was paying was a category called Other Expenses, which totaled around $1,600. What other expenses was I paying for? Room and board was $15,000, books and supplies were $1,000, then I had $1,600 in other. Part of that $1,600 was a $66 fee for a federal loan. I was getting charged for the loan they were giving me. I also had a $500 non-refundable room deposit each semester that I did not get back. This school was a great school and was known for criminal justice. It would have been just a great school for me to earn the degree I was looking for. But the cost of tuition was so high that I decided it would be the best and smart financial decision to come home. Now let's talk about the loans I have. When it came to get my loan, my parents and I tried multiple different vendors. I had a great credit score as a high school senior, but did not have the income, which ended up hurting me. We tried with just my name on the loan, then we tried with one parent, and then we tried with the other parent. We were denied every time. My dad had the income they were looking for, but not the credit score. My mom had the credit score they wanted, but didn't have the income. They couldn't even co-sign for me. At that point, we were stuck and were not sure how we would come up with this money for me to go to this school I fell in love with. Our last final option was my aunt, who luckily got approved as a co-signer through Sallie Mae. Unfortunately, with that loan came the very high interest rate. She already had her own loans out, which made my loan have a high interest rate. So now the $19,000 would turn into $40,000 after interest. After 4 years of college, if I remained receiving the same federal loan amount plus my private loan, even switching to Castleton, I'm going to be paying back around $60,000 6 short months after I graduate. This is an eye-opening number that could scare away a low-income student looking to go to college. Loans are not easy to find, especially if you don't have that person willing to co-sign. It's hard for a high school student to get the loan of their own if they do not have the credit. I have definitely had my fair share of debt already, and I'm only a sophomore. Thankfully, I made the right decision early enough that my debt won't be as bad as it could have been. College is very expensive, part of education, and something needs to be changed to make it more affordable for the low-income families and students looking to further their education. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Janine Dunlap is our next panelist. In 2013, Janine was laid off from a job. She went to CCV and Johnson State College to earn her associate's and bachelor's degree and graduated this August. She attended as a full-time student and maxed out her loans. Now she cannot co-sign her daughter's student loans, who is now attending Siena College, because her debt is so substantial. Her youngest son also aspires to attend college. Janine.
Good evening. I am the mother of 3. I have a 25-year-old, a 19-year-old, and a 17-year-old. My 25-year-old, when she got out of high school, went to college for a year, found that it wasn't for her, and got a job. She lives paycheck to paycheck every day, every week. And in 2013, I've always had a job, I've always had a place to go, and I was laid off from my job with no job to go to. So because of my child being in the Upward Bound program, I decided to go to college. And if I was going to go to college at 42, I figured I better do it in 4 years. just like everybody else, so I just gave up everything, and my husband worked his tail off for me, and I maxed out all of our loans so I could make ends meet where we needed to, because we had 2 teenagers at home. I did receive my bachelor's degree in 4 years, which is great. My debt for those 4 years is $55,000. Just for 4 years, I only have a bachelor's degree. And I say that because when I went to look for jobs, it is amazing the difference in the income and the availability of jobs from a bachelor's to a master's. You're talking somewhere upward of $20,000 to start with a year. That's a big income. And there's so many more opportunities once you get this master's degree. So after a long discussion with my husband, we have decided that I will continue, hopefully here at Castleton next summer, and get the master's degree, regardless of what the debt will be, and hopefully we will be able to acquire loans. In 2016, my middle daughter went to Siena College, which is a $60,000 a year college, but they paid for more than half as a scholarship. So she had to take out about $10,000 to $12,000 last year, and then again this year. Last year was no problem. We were able to co-sign a loan. This year, with my debt to ratio, without very much income, my husband and I were unable to co-sign the loan for her, and we scrambled. She did get the loan, but we are very concerned about the next year because I just don't see how any of my situation is going to change, and she will, again, need some more money to go. I also have a son who's a junior at Poultney High School who is taking classes at CCV because they're free. He gets to take a class each semester. And after long conversations, he's going to apply for the early college program here at Castleton because he will get 1 full year of college for free, which will be the best thing. But our concern is what he does after that. If I can't pay for the one that's already in college because I'm in college, how am I going to pay for the second one to go to college? It's just so many people, we went from, as I said, we're living paycheck to paycheck. There is no savings. Our house is not paid for. We still have kids at home. I have a grandchild now. Her mother can't save for her. How am I going to save for her? Because I can't save for my own self or my children. So a program that's coming through this legislation would be wonderful. And it would definitely take so much burden off kids with low-income families so that they could attend college without the guilt, without the stress. Any college student knows if you're going to college and you're paying for it yourself, it's even worse stress. Or if your parents are paying for it, it's stressful. You know that you've got to complete it. And if you're getting scholarships, chances are you have to keep a certain grade point average. That's also very stressful. You know, it just is very difficult. So I'm hoping all of this will help and get my son into college and keep my daughter in college and myself. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you, Janine. I'm going to introduce now for very brief remarks somebody I've known for many years who has done a great job as president of this university. And let's welcome David Wolk.
That's it. Yeah, we got it. Great to see all of you. Thank you. Welcome to Castleton University, the small university with a big heart, just like you, Senator Sanders. Big heart. I've had the very good fortune to be president at Castleton for 16 years and a public servant in education and government for 43 years. And I have known Senator Sanders during that entire time. For those of you not at Castleton tonight, but instead watching or listening in across the country, let me tell you something about our U.S. Senator that you may not already know. You know him as a champion for civil rights, pay equity, social justice, campaign finance reform, criminal justice reform, environmental consciousness and civic action, advocacy for the less fortunate, healthcare reform, middle-class tax relief, support for veterans, and political activism in its many forms. We know him as the brave soul who ran for mayor of Vermont's largest city as a progressive in 1981, and he won by 10 votes, and then he was reelected 3 times. We know him as our U.S. representative for 16 years and as our U.S. senator since 2006. And you know him as the man who could have become our president. And we know him as the man who was a first-generation college student struggling to make it in an era when there was not much support, graduating from the University of Chicago after both his parents had passed away, a self-starter who made his way through college and life with perseverance. You may not know him as well as we do, but here are some other qualities that I admire. Persistent courage, youthful vitality. In fact, some people mistake him as my much better looking and much younger brother. In fact, I remember a couple of years ago, it wasn't even an election year, we had a football game, thousands of people, you didn't have to be there. Do you remember? You were throwing the football around with all kinds of students there. And I remember that game, we missed you as quarterback. He's a man with an amazing memory. He's a terrific quick study, compassionate heart, never-ending fighter. And one more, as I conclude, that I admire most, something that has not changed in all the years that I have known Bernie, consistency. Think about it. The message that you hear tonight and the message that Senator Sanders gives wherever he is, no matter the audience, in public or private conversations, is this: consistency. His message has never changed. I heard it 40-plus years ago. How many politicians change their message depending upon the crowd? Not Bernie Sanders. He's been honest, he's been courageous, and he has been consistent. It is my honor to introduce Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you, Bernie. You are awesome.
We're proud of you.
We'll get together soon.
Yeah.
Well, David, thank you so much for all that you've done for the state of Vermont and for this university. And let me thank Castleton for hosting this event. I want to thank all of you who are here tonight and thank the many thousands of people on college campuses and at homes all across the nation who are watching this via live stream. I don't have to tell anybody in this room or in this country that our nation faces enormous problems, economic problems, political problems, environmental problems, social problems. Economically, over the last 40 years, the middle class of this country has been shrinking, and we now have some 40 million Americans living in poverty. We don't talk about it. We have 40 million people living in poverty. All across America, we have people, and we've heard some of that discussion here tonight, we have people who are working 2 or 3 jobs, 60 or 70 hours a week in order to put food on the table and pay the bills. Meanwhile, while the middle class continues to shrink, the gap between the very rich and everybody else is growing wider, and we have more income and wealth inequality than almost any other major country on earth. That's what's going on economically. What's going on politically? Politically, and let's be honest about it, we have a corrupt political system which, as a result of the disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, allows billionaires to spend hundreds of millions of dollars every single year to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. You get one vote, they get one vote, and hundreds of millions of dollars to buy elections. We also have a president and Republican governors all over this country who are working overtime to suppress the vote, to make it harder for people of color, poor people, young people to participate in our democracy. Environmentally, we face the global crisis of climate change. The planet is getting warmer, and in the United States and all over the world, we face the threat of more drought, more floods, more acidification of the oceans, more rising sea levels, and more extreme weather disturbances like what we have recently seen in Puerto Rico, Texas, Florida, the Virgin Islands, and elsewhere. And as I drove in here tonight, we heard about the fires taking place in California, hundreds of homes being burned down. Climate change is a monumental environmental crisis. What's going on socially, beyond economics, beyond politics? Socially, as a result of President Trump's efforts to divide us up, we are seeing more overt displays of racism and anti-Semitism. We are seeing a rise in right-wing extremism, more religious bigotry against Muslims and other religious minorities, and a very intentional effort to arouse hatred against undocumented immigrants, Latinos, and others. We are also seeing the president trying to turn back the clock on women's rights and the needs of the LGBT community. Now, I raise these issues because I do not believe we are going to solve any of these problems, and a lot more that I didn't discuss, unless we address the topic that I want to speak to you about tonight. And that is the need for the United States to have the best educated population in the world, the need to make public colleges and universities tuition-free, and the need to significantly lower the outrageous level of student debt that currently exists. Today, as a result of rapidly rising college costs, stagnant or declining income for the middle class, and major cutbacks in state and federal aid for higher education, hundreds of thousands of bright, young Americans are unable to go to college for one reason and one reason alone, and that is their families lack the money to send them to college. How tragic is that? Think about that for a moment. Think about being a bright, young, 18-year-old who wants to become a doctor, who wants to become a scientist, who wants to become a teacher, but your family lacks the income and you cannot get a higher education. Not only will these young people not be able to fulfill their personal dreams, but the overall economy suffers as well. How many great scientists, doctors, educators, business people are not being created because these young men and women do not receive the education they want and need? But this crisis impacts not only those who are unable to afford to go to college. It impacts millions of Americans who have attended college and graduate school and who leave school with outrageous levels of student debt. Debt that they sometimes spend a lifetime paying off, literally a lifetime. Unbelievably, in America today, there are 44 million Americans who owe more than $1.3 trillion in student debt. This $1.3 trillion in student debt is now higher, bigger number, than either credit card debt or automobile loan debt. Now, what does that debt mean to the individual, especially those people who are working at jobs that do not pay them a living wage? It means that after you pay off your student debt month after month after month, you may not have the money to buy a car. It means you may not have the money to buy a house, and it means that you may not even be able to afford to have the children that you want. But here's what it also means that might be even more important. It means that millions of Americans may not be doing the jobs that they want to do, the jobs that they dreamed about doing because of the burden of student debt. We have, and let me give you some examples of that, we have a major crisis in this country in terms of affordable early childhood education. In Vermont and all over this country, it is hard to get quality, affordable child care. But if you become a child care worker and you make $14 an hour and you have high levels of student debt, will you choose that important profession that this country desperately needs? And the answer is no. You will not make child care your career because you're not making enough money to pay off your student debt. What about somebody graduating law school and wanting to go into public law, not Wall Street law, but public law, perhaps as a public defender or a legal aid lawyer or an immigration lawyer or an environmental lawyer? How do you do that when salaries in those professions are $40,000 or $50,000 a year and you're carrying $100,000 or $200,000 in student debt? We are in desperate need, and we heard this discussion tonight from one of our panelists here in Castleton. We are in desperate need of primary care physicians in medically underserved areas throughout rural America and in our inner cities. Now, how do you become a primary care physician when you have a student debt of $300,000? It is possible, but it is not easy. In other words, the devastating burden of high student debt not only causes enormous financial problems for individuals and families, it also destroys dreams. It often drives people into jobs they would prefer not to be doing, but that they are forced to do in order to earn the high salaries they need to pay off those debts. The current situation regarding the financing of higher education is not only unfair to the working families of the United States, but is incredibly stupid when we look at the long-term needs of our economy. Everybody knows that in a highly competitive global economy, our middle class and our nation will not succeed unless we have the best educated workforce in the world. Our economy will not grow and prosper unless we have the workforce capable of performing the jobs of the future. 50 years ago, if you had a high school degree in Vermont or any place in this country, the odds were that you could go out with that high school degree and get a decent job and make it into the middle class. The education and the job skills that you had allowed you to get some of the very best jobs available. That was 50 years ago. But an exploding technology has changed the world. While not all middle-class jobs in today's economy require post-secondary education, an increasing number do. By 2020, it is estimated that 2/3 of all jobs in the United States will require some education beyond high school. 2/3. And these jobs, of course, tend to pay better. Generally speaking, the more education you have, the better income that you make. Nationally, a worker with an associate's degree, 2-year degree, will earn about $360,000 more over his or her career than a worker with a high school diploma, $360,000. And a worker with a bachelor's degree will earn almost $1 million more during the course of his or her lifetime of work. Bottom line, it is increasingly difficult to make it into the middle class without some higher education, because that is where the jobs of the future are. Now, let me give you some news that is really quite scary and does not bode well for the future of our country unless we change this dynamic. Not so many years ago, the United States led the world in graduation rates. We had a higher percentage of college graduates between the ages of 25 and 34 than any other country on earth. We were the best educated nation, and not surprisingly, we had the strongest economy. Today, in terms of the percentage of our young people graduating college, we have fallen to 11th place, behind such countries as Japan, South Korea, Canada, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Australia, and Switzerland. 11th place is not the place for a great nation like the United States. 11th place is not the place to be if we want to be a prosperous nation, and this has got to change. In my view, the time is long, long overdue to change that dynamic. It is time to make public colleges and universities tuition-free for the working families of our country. It is time for every school child in this country to understand, and these are kids in the 5th grade and the 6th grade, to understand, to get it into their heads, that if they take school seriously and they study hard, they will be able to get a higher education regardless of the income of their families. Now, one of the very frightening developments that's taking place in this country is all over America we have too many kids who are dropping out of high school. And I suspect that many of those kids at a very young age got the clue that it really didn't matter how well they did in school because they're never going to make it to the middle class. They're never going to get a higher education. College was unattainable. And what I want and what I know you want is for every mom and dad and teacher and child in this country to know that a college education is not unattainable despite the income of your family. That's what we've got to accomplish. And let me be very clear. When we talk about making post-high school education tuition-free, we're not just talking about 4-year universities and colleges. We are talking about community colleges. We're talking about vocational schools. We are talking about apprenticeships. We desperately need highly trained and highly skilled electricians, welders, plumbers, mechanics, pipe fitters, and healthcare workers of every kind. And those young people also must have the opportunity to get the training they need. In the wealthiest country in the history of the world, which is what we are today, everybody who has the desire and the ability should be able to get a college education regardless of their ability to pay. And that is why I introduced the College for All Act that would make public colleges and universities in America tuition-free for families earning $125,000 per year or less, which is 86% of our population. Let me be very clear in suggesting to you that this is not a radical idea. A number of nations around the world are doing just that today. They are investing in their young people so that they will have the educated workforce that they need, and so that their young people are not burdened with high levels of student debt. In Germany, in Finland, in Denmark, in Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and in other countries, public colleges and universities today are tuition-free. In Germany, public colleges are free not only for the German people, but also for international students, including some 11,000 students from the United States of America. Young people in America should not have to go to Germany to get free tuition for their college education. And let us also understand that it wasn't that long ago that our own government understood the value of investing heavily in higher education and treating higher education and accessibility to higher education as a public good, as a sensible investment. In 1944, just before the end of World War II, Congress passed the GI Bill providing a free college education to millions of World War II veterans. It has been widely acknowledged that this legislation, the GI Bill, was one of the most successful pieces of legislation ever passed in the modern history of our country, laying the groundwork for the extraordinary post-World War II economic boom, and as a result of that, paying for itself many times over. But it was not just the federal government that acted in the past. In 1965, average tuition at a four-year state public university was just $256. And many of the best colleges, such as the City University of New York, did not charge any tuition. In other words, all that we are fighting for is going back to where we were 50 years ago. Not a very radical idea. The University of California system, considered by many to be the crown jewel of public higher education in this country, did not charge tuition until the 1980s. In other words, making public colleges and university tuition-free is not a new idea. It is not a radical idea. We have already been there and done that, and it is a policy that works. The good news is that in the last several years, governors, state legislators, and local officials around the country now understand the current financial crisis regarding higher education, and they are doing the right thing by moving forward to make public colleges and universities tuition free. This year, the City College of San Francisco began offering tuition-free college, and their enrollment for residents of that city increased by 51% compared to the prior year. In other words, they opened the door and they said anybody in San Francisco can come in if you have the background and the ability, and people came in by the thousands. In New York State this year, tens of thousands of New York residents will go to the city's public colleges and universities without paying tuition. Similar programs have popped up in Tennessee, in Oregon, in the cities of Detroit and Chicago. A few years ago, this was seen, the idea of making public colleges and universities, as a very radical idea, unattainable. Well, all over this country, people are taking a hard look at this concept, and we are making good progress. Now, some people will say, and I hear this every day, they say, well, you know, it's a good idea, Bernie, to make public colleges and universities tuition-free. But it's expensive. It costs a lot of money. How are you going to pay for it? Well, the truth is, it is expensive. And I will tell you exactly how we are going to pay for it. At a time of massive income and wealth inequality, at a time when in the last 40 years, trillions of dollars in wealth have left the pockets of the middle class and working class of this country and have ended up in the bank accounts of the top 0.1%. At a time when the wealthiest people in this country have made huge amounts of money from risky derivative transactions and the soaring value of the stock market, we will pay for this legislation by imposing a tax on Wall Street speculation. That's how we're going to pay for it. Some of you may remember that in 2008, in the midst of the financial meltdown, which was caused by the greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior of Wall Street, the taxpayers of this country, not with my vote, but Congress voted to bail out Wall Street. Now it is Wall Street's time to help rebuild the middle class of this country. And I want you to hear this, because you will hear many of my conservative colleagues in the Senate and the House all over this country. They're going to tell you that the cost of making public colleges and universities tuition-free and cutting interest rates on student debt in half will cost $569 billion over a 10-year period, and that is just too expensive. $569 billion over 10 years, just too expensive. That's what they will tell you. Well, when they tell you that, I want you to ask them why they support President Trump's budget, which would provide $1.9 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%. Those are the national priorities we are now struggling with in Washington. We can spend $569 billion to make public colleges and universities tuition-free, or we can give 3 times that amount in tax breaks to the top 1%. I think the answer to that question is pretty clear. Let's stand with the middle class and working families of this country. Now, let me be very clear. We can win this fight, and don't let anybody tell you that we cannot. The polls that I have seen and the public sentiment that is out there is strongly on our side, and the American people understand the need for this legislation. But we will not win unless millions of Americans, especially young people, stand up, fight back, and demand that this legislation be passed. And that means you and you and you. If you are prepared to stand up and fight back, we will win this struggle. As a United States Senator, I can tell you that real change never takes place unless it comes from the grassroots, from the bottom on up. Real change never takes place from the top on down. It takes place when millions of people demand that change. Left alone, Congress and the White House will listen to their billionaire friends on Wall Street and their wealthy friends in corporate America. They will listen to the lobbyists who are all over Capitol Hill, and they will certainly listen to their big money contributors who fund their campaigns. If we are going to win this fight, your voices need to be heard, not only on the some 700 campuses watching this event tonight, but from every university, every college, every junior college, and apprenticeship program in America. Tonight, I am asking all of you to act. The College for All Act I introduced with 7 of my colleagues in the Senate, and Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal's introduced in the House of Representatives, the same legislation, with 35 co-sponsors, needs more support. We need more support in the Senate. We need more support in the House. This bill, as I mentioned, would make public colleges and universities tuition-free and cut interest rates on student debt in half. Tonight, I am asking you to please call your member of the Senate. Ask them if they are a co-sponsor of S-806, which is the number of my legislation. Ask them to also, if they are in the House of Representatives, to sponsor H.R. 1880, which is the comparable bill in Congress. Tell them, when you call their office, tell them your story. Tell them what's going on in your life and what this legislation would mean to you and your family and why you support it. Furthermore, you, by getting actively involved in the political process, can invite your United States senators, your members of Congress, to your campus to talk about the high cost of college education and what student debt means to you. On Election Day, members of the Congress and the Senate and candidates all over this country, they want your vote. Now it is your turn to tell them what you want. That's called democracy. Let's exercise those democratic rights. But there is more to do than simply advocating for the College for All Act. We have got to work together to build a movement, and that can start on your campus through your actions. You can start a conversation with your friends. Start talking about this issue And what you're going to see is your friends and your roommates, they're going to start nodding their head. Because what we have heard here tonight and the stories of your lives are the stories of millions of people. You can ask your student government to pass a resolution in support of tuition-free public colleges and urge the administration and board of trustees of your school to do the same. The more support we have, the stronger our chances are. Ask your governor and state legislature to get moving on this issue. A number of states are already doing that. Is your state on board? Is it more important, as is occurring all over this country, to give tax breaks to the rich or to build more jails or to make public colleges and universities tuition-free? I think it's more important to make sure that our young people can get a higher education. There are many ways you can get involved and participate in this movement, and it's up to you to decide what actions will be most effective on your campus and in your community. But the truth is, and here is a simple but profound truth, is that like every other great struggle in American history, workers' rights, civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, environmental protection, we only win when we are prepared to stand up and fight. That is the history of America. And what you are undertaking now and must undertake is not only for yourselves. Yes, I understand that if we reduce student debt and we make public and colleges and universities tuition-free now, it will impact you. But I want you to think about future generations. I want you to think about the need for this country to be the best educated country on earth. And I want you to understand that a higher education today is the equivalent of what a high school education was 50 years ago. We can make this happen when millions of people stand up and tell their elected officials that we need to transform the financing of higher education, not just for individuals, but for the future of this country. If we stand up and fight, we're going to win this thing, and I look forward to going ahead on this monumentally important project with you. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
As always, the amazing Bernie Sanders. And there goes our live stream. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Oh, just some buffering. I don't know if he's going to take questions or not. Audio's gone, so I'm going to guess not. That was it. Bernie Sanders, everybody. Talking about education, I was saying that sounds like Bernie practicing speech for 2020 to me, a specific speech. And there was a lot of good information in there. But the main point was, we know what we need to do now, right? We've been doing this for a while. We need to go put pressure on our elected officials, the ones that we know about right now. We need to tell them this is what we want. He gave the numbers, the two bills. I don't have them, sorry, but guys, get them. I'm sure they're out in Twitter land and social right now. We need to bug our representatives. This is our job in democracy. That's how it works. We need to tell them that we want them to vote yes on this, and if they don't, we're going to boot their asses out of office. That's how it works. So get to work, everybody. And thank you all for being here. We've got more than 200 people. They had about 1,000 people on the mainstream here, and I'm sure it was, it was going lots of other places, so that was great. I got to get out of here because we're having a meeting to talk about a People's Summit that we're going to do virtually in Portland, hopefully in November. So we're going to get out of here with one of my favorites, which is Gil Scott-Heron's "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised," because somebody mentioned earlier, and this is so true, MSM is nothing about this, right? They're not talking about this. Bernie Sanders doing a speech on education, no one's saying anything. They don't care. This is all broadcast on the internet. And if we lose our internet freedoms, then we're really screwed. So we also got to bug our representatives about that one. And anybody who votes against freedom on the internet, we need to boot their ass out, right? That's our job. So get to work. All right. See you guys tomorrow night. Join us for, here, actually, Sarah Smith. Tomorrow, candidate for Washington's 9th District. Join us for that conversation on We the People, right here on Uphill Media. Thanks, everybody.
You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag and skip out for beer during commercials because the revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by Xerox in 4 parts without commercial interruptions. The revolution will not show you pictures of Nixon blowing a bugle and leading a charge by John Mitchell, General Abrams, and Spyro Agnew to eat hog maws confiscated from a Harlem sanctuary. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be brought to you by the Schaefer Award Theater and will not star Natalie Woods and Steve McQueen or Bullwinkle and Julia. The revolution will not give your mouth sex appeal. The revolution will not get rid of the nub. The revolution will not make you look 5 pounds thinner because the revolution will not be televised, brother. There will be no pictures of you and Willie Mae pushing that shopping cart down the block on the dead run or trying to slide that color TV into a stolen ambulance. NBC will not be able to predict the winner at 8:32 on report from 29 districts. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of pigs shooting down brothers on the instant replay. There will be no pictures of Whitney Young being run out of Harlem on a rail with a brand new process. There will be no slow motion or still life of Roy Wilkins strolling through Watts in a red, black, and green liberation jumpsuit that he has been saving for just the proper occasion. Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, and Hooterville Junction will no longer be so damn relevant, and women will not care if Dick finally got down with Jane on Search for Tomorrow, because black people will be in the street looking for a brighter day. The revolution will not be televised. There will be no highlights on the 11 o'clock news and no pictures of Harry R. Women Liberationists and Jackie Onassis blowing her nose. The theme song will not be written by Jim Webb or Francis Scott Keys, nor sung by Glenn Campbell, Tom Jones, Johnny Cash, Engelbert Humperdinck, or The Rare Earth. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be right back after a message about a white tornado, white lightning, or white people. You will not have to worry about a dove in your bedroom, the tiger in your tank, or the giant in your toilet bowl. The revolution will not go better with Coke. The revolution will not fight germs that may cause bad breath. The revolution will put you in the driver's seat. The revolution will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised, will not be televised. The revolution will be no rerun, brothers. The revolution will be live.